Welcome to this week's podcast of Life is Better With You in It, and I will be your humble host, Jen Kramer. And we bring on people who are making the community a better place, doing awesome things in the world, and just overall some good people who we can learn from. And so one of our guests we have this week is my friend Caroline. Hi, Caroline.
Hi, Jen. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for being on this morning because I want our listeners to hear all about you and your journey. And so we're going to talk to Caroline today about, a career pivot, right? Those keep coming up for us. We're going to talk about teaching. We're going to talk about health and all of the good things. So I think that this will be a definitely learning podcast. So grab your coffee or your favorite beverage and kind of cuddle in and cozy up because we're going to have a great conversation today. So Caroline, tell us a little bit about you and your background and maybe why we're talking today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, Jen. I think a few years ago, I would have answered that question with sort of the typical identity questions, right? Or identity answers rather, like I'm a wife, a mom of 3 teenagers, an educator. I know. Yeah. Great. They're great. Teenagers are great. Trust me. And I'm a health coach. And over the past few years, I've sort of shifted that answer to focus more on values and strengths. And so I believe really strongly in the human potential for the mind and body to do amazing things in healing and in learning and growing and serving the world. So I'm an empath and an encouraging kind of coach-minded person. I think that is really what prompted me to shift my focus from teaching primarily to coaching, which is a little bit teaching, but also a lot different.
Yeah. And like what the goals are probably different and what you're looking to achieve as a result ends differently than it is with teaching, right? Teaching, you're trying to teach specific subjects or specific skills, but with coaching, you're walking alongside them probably in a more one-on-one fashion than you would in maybe a school setting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is really what I loved the most about teaching was that kind of coaching role. I loved teaching kids around what we call the soft skills, which are, like self-control, managing one's impulsivity, developing good work habits, time management, and really mindset around learning. So that was my favorite thing to do. It would be to sit in a small group or one-on-one with children who were maybe struggling in, say, learning multiplication, because I was a 3rd grade teacher forever. And, a kiddo that comes to the table believing, I'm bad at math, or this is really hard, or everybody else is better than I am. And I taught in a gifted school. And so that population of gifted students really tends to struggle with perfectionism and comparison. And so working with them to kind of uncover their beliefs and shift their mindset to understanding that learning comes with failure and learning comes from mistakes and repetition and practice, and a lot of acceptance and empathy is built into that. And I realized that the skills that I was teaching these kiddos around the soft skills were really things that sometimes we know as adults. A lot of adults don't know these things, though.
We could have a lesson or two from Caroline on empath skills.
Well, I just found that, even the teacher side of me was like, I know this stuff, but am I living it? Right. The stuff that I'm teaching my kids. And so, I'm kind of a self-help junkie, devour everything around the self-help section in the in the Barnes and Noble. And I just became really interested in that intersection of personal and professional development.
Yeah, that's awesome. Tell me about how long you've taught for, and tell me something that you really loved about teaching, right? Like I think teaching is probably one of the most important jobs, right? Like I feel like teachers are really not paid enough for what they do all day. And even like I've been volunteering in the school, just seeing like just the chaos. Like it's organized chaos, but there's just so many kids going around. There's so many personalities and teachers having to kind of wrangle, teach, learn, care for. I think they do a lot of different jobs than just being just a teacher. So tell us how long you've taught for, and tell me something that you really loved about teaching.
Well, I've taught for well over 20 years in a couple of different capacities, everything from preschool through fourth grade in like a traditional sense in traditional schools and Montessori school. I've worked with high school students in youth groups and kind of different teaching capacities. And gosh, there are so many things that I love about teaching. I think number one is the relationships, relationships with students and their families, because I think, really in order to learn, we have to feel safe, right? First and foremost, physically and psychologically safe to take risks and grow. And so I loved being able to create that environment for kids. Honestly, when people ask why I became a teacher, I had a few good teacher role models, but overall, I didn't love school at all. I was the kid that was in the nurse's office like all the time.
Taking the bathroom breaks.
Oh yeah, long bathroom breaks, massive task avoider, massive, perfectionist like skills as well. And so really kind of getting in my way. And I just always felt like there would be a better way because I love learning. And so I think that's why I got into education. And so relationships are really important to me. But the other thing that I really loved about teaching was the idea of planning and strategic planning and taking like a really big view of a learning goal and breaking it down into smaller pieces based on individual learning needs. So kind of looking at the whole picture and looking at the parts and setting goals for my kiddos to get where they wanted to be. And so the planning piece and the relationship piece and those soft skills piece kind of all meld interestingly into this new coaching model.
Love that. Okay. Tell me quickly how, and then I want to touch on what you just dabbled into. So tell me about maybe how your thoughts on maybe how education has changed, but how, not really in a negative way. You can share if it's negative or not, and I know obviously there's tons of things that are going around about education system and schools, and then people talking about homesteading and homeschooling and like the differences and everything like that. But tell me how parents can help. And tell me how grandparents and then the people in the community can help. Like what has changed and maybe how can they help?
Oh, wow. That is a really great question.
I don't know if it can be answered in our podcast, but we'll see.
I know, right? I think parents can help because I have parents come ask me this a lot. Some of my former parents, who I still have relationships with, will come and ask how they can help their child in their classroom this year. And my answer is always to build a relationship with the teacher. I think that is really powerful. And, one of those problems I think that a lot of teachers are feeling right now is that pressure and that feeling of being under a microscope and judgment from parents when they're trying to do this big, hard job. And so personally, I always felt just a sense of relief and empowerment and moving forward positively when I could develop a good relationship with a parent. And when a parent can reach out and say, hey, I see my kiddos struggling with this at home. Like, what can I do to help? Or how can I help you to help them in the classroom?
So proactive communication with the teacher to reach out and say, hey, I'm a partner. Hey, like I support you. Hey, I want to like do these extra things. I know for me, like with the kids, I like will reach out and be like, hey, like my son said that you guys were almost out of printer paper. I sent him in with some. Is this helpful? Like, I'm not trying to brown nose, but I'm trying to be connected in such a way that's like, hey, I'm here if you need me.
Yeah. And even just that message, like, hey, I'm here if you need me. Like, I'm on your side. I've got your back. Like, let me know how I can help. And just some check-ins is just really, really nice. I know, not every parent can get in and volunteer in the classroom and that sort of shifted a little bit too in recent years, how much we are, allowing parents in to volunteer. But I think that really just that knowing that they're there and have that support is so powerful.
So parents with kids, any age in any school, send a note to your teacher today. That is your task for today. So if you get nothing else from the podcast, send an email to the teacher, say thank you and how can I help?
That's great. And I bet even high school teachers would massively appreciate that, right?
Okay, there we go. You have your directions, listeners. All right, let's transition to this thing that you touched on and how you've talked about moving into coaching and moving into this whole health fitness journey. So when you and I spoke, to attempt to see if you wanted to hop on the podcast, we talked about this thing of rocks and pebbles and then boulders of things to make a change. And what I'm learning when people are hopping on this podcast is that a lot of people are making career pivots. Nobody's really talking about that. And I've made my own pivot, right, to move into this space of writing and podcasting and something that's just outside of recruiting, just to see, for S&Gs, just to see what happens. So what was it about your journey that led you to a career pivot? And what were those rocks and those pebbles and those boulders that you were getting these signs that you should make a change, but you weren't totally listening yet, and then you did? So tell me about that. Walk us through that experience.
Well, it's probably like a really long journey, but like from what I can sort of dissect of it, like about 10 years ago, as a teacher, I really began experiencing those kind of early stages of burnout. And this is like way before like burnout was a term, right? And didn't really understand what was going on. I started experiencing panic attacks, like severe anxiety, just a lot of illnesses kind of over and over and over, and some undiagnosed respiratory illnesses that just kind of couldn't really get resolved. Wow. And through this sort of, like I told you, I'm a self-help junkie. So I started to do the research and digging in and to how I might be able to help myself. And I really started to prioritize my sleep, my nutrition. I had always been exercising. It's just kind of, I'm a mover. Can't sit still.
I'll walk in spirit, but
well, walking is great. Walking in spirit is great. Yeah. But I just needed to change up the way I was moving to kind of meet where my body was at that time. And really learning to manage my stress and manage my mind in the same way as I was teaching my children to regulate themselves. Like I was not regulated in my nervous system. And so I began to do that work. And as I was kind of healing myself, we ran into the pandemic. And I started to notice that, I was not the only one in this. I was looking up and down the hall at my teaching colleagues and seeing a lot of signs of the same thing: chronic illnesses like high blood sugar, hypertension, heart disease, weight gain, lack of sleep, like just a lot of these like inflammatory kinds of things that, now really can be addressed with lifestyle changes. And so I just I was feeling these like nudges and pulls kind of all along the way. And so I got my certification as a health coach, and then spent the next 2 years as we got back from the pandemic, meeting in small groups with my teaching colleagues and working through some of these kind of, as we were learning to identify this burnout issue, really helping to address that, prioritizing self-care,
Yeah.
prioritizing nutrition and sleep, and not self-care in like a fluffy kind of a
Go to
way.
the spa and spend $300.
Yes, please. Um, and really recognizing that having care for ourselves empowers us to be strong enough to, maybe make the changes that we need for our own well-being. And so I was kind of feeling these nudges, having a few like kind of pebbles in my own well-being thrown at my head and say, hey, pay attention, pay attention. Wasn't paying attention really, because I always thought I would be a teacher forever. Right. No, we don't. I mean, like, that was my identity. I was a teacher and I loved my work. I loved my job. I just was feeling this kind of like calling to do something else. And through a series of events and circumstances, kind of those pebbles became a little bit bigger, kind of some rocks thrown at my
Kind
head.
of like, oh, that one hurt. Okay.
Eventually you get the boulder, and that one really knocks you out. And I have learned over the years to kind of recognize those a little bit sooner with every season, and really to be grateful for those rocks that get thrown at us, or those challenges that can sometimes just really take us out. And so I decided to go ahead and get my national board certification and just make the investment in myself and what I was doing, because I believe so firmly in this. And it's just too good. I just want everybody to know about it. So
that's awesome. So you finally listened once the rocks got a little bit bigger. And as the seasons go on, it sounds like you're able to kind of navigate like, okay, these things keep coming up. What is this telling me versus getting frustrated at what's happening? You know that your body and your path is changing, right? You can feel it. And then you're saying, what is this telling me? Like, instead of getting upset, right? I think sometimes when circumstances come up, we get really upset about like, why me? Like, why is this happening right now? I don't understand. I'm on this direction. This is the journey that I'm supposed to be on. And then I think, I think of God and I go, okay, it looks like he's taking me down a different path, and I'm getting nudged this way. I'm feeling this way inside. How do I shift? So it sounds like you started to recognize it and then you made that shift. So why health coaching?
So again, just that understanding that the human body and the human mind have this power to heal, and I just want to empower other people to be successful in that, so that they can bring their best selves to their families, so that they can bring their best selves to the work that they do and the ways that they're contributing to the world and serving the world. Because I think, again, with that, sometimes we get so caught up in the things that are feeling so urgent in lives. Whether it's taking care of small children, everything is urgent, right? Everything.
All the diapers, nap time.
Tantrums, all those things, they're super urgent, right? And learning to carve out time for the important nourishment and nurturing of ourselves, and really digging into our belief system and our values to be able to bridge that gap between what we know we should do for ourselves, right? Like, we know how to eat well. There's no
we should
knowledge.
Sleep 8 hours a night to be properly rested and patient for the rest of the people in our house.
For sure. Like, we know all of these things, and there's what's called the knowing doing gap. And it's just in helping bridge that gap between what we know and what we know we need to do, but how do we get there? And it's not as easy as we might think, right? It's like that, what's the Nike slogan? Like, just do it, right?
It's hard to just do it.
I don't love that, because, we know with behavior change science that there are stages of change that we need to walk through, and having a coach to be able to walk us through those stages and help us get there a little bit faster, with a little bit, maybe fewer rocks or boulders getting thrown at our heads. Right. So I've often just felt like in my life, I've wanted to be that person that I needed at a particular time in my life for somebody else. And I think that was part of teaching. Like I wanted to be the teacher that I needed when I was a kid. Um, and now I just hope to be able to be that coach that I needed when I was walking through my journey so that I can help other people maybe get there a little faster, with a little less pain points.
Yeah. A couple less rocks in their journey.
Yeah.
So how long have you been health coaching for?
About 3 years now.
So in these 3 years, you've probably talked to a gamut of people, right? I'm sure you've probably run, talking to probably both genders and different ages and different maybe stages and seasons of people in their lives. What are a couple of things that you've seen as a trend over these past 3 years of maybe problems or lack of skills or knowledge that you would want to share with the listeners today? Like what are maybe a couple of things that you would say, here's the things I hear a lot and here's what I tell those people, because this is sometimes what they need to hear to help make action. Like I wonder like what things come up for you when you're talking to clients. Because obviously I know you and I have chatted and we talked about like how I went through this season of my son and like totally changing the way I even looked at my body after having kids, and how I trusted my body so much more. And I stopped worrying about weight. And then I lost the weight. And it was like, is that what I had to do the whole time? Like I just had to trust my body and I lost the weight. Like how did that happen? And like even knowing how to stop eating when I was full, like that's like been mind blowing over the past few years, because I always thought I had to grow up and eat and eat my whole plate. Right. Because that's like, it's no fault of my parents, right? That's how they were raised. And I was like, oh yeah, we just have to eat our plate till we're like, it's gone. But now there's a totally different concept of food and eating until you're just full. And as soon as you're full, stop eating. Right. What are some things, I'm curious, that have come up for your clients that you feel like the whole world needs to know?
Well, I think you just hit on that. It's mindset, right? So not so much the skill set or like knowing what to do, although sometimes we need some information, or some of us may have some gaps in knowledge around nutrition that can be kind of quickly shored up, right? But it's really that mindset, because there's this belief really in the diet and wellness culture that that change just starts with action. So like, just do it, take the action, follow the diet, follow this plan. But we know now that change really begins with thought and our thinking patterns. So, and if we dig a little bit deeper, it even comes before that in our belief about ourselves. And so it's really about uncovering those mindsets that are holding us back. And so you mentioned, like in my family, we called it the clean plate club. And like we always had to clean our plate, and eat everything, because there were children who were starving in the world, and we needed to eat the food. And so it's
not even their fault. Like this is just how everybody felt about food. And we were grateful and we just did what our parents said because it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And those mindsets that served us at a particular time in our life, right? And those were working for us, and they were important, because probably when we're kids, we were being picky eaters and we needed the nourishment that our parents were giving us anyway.
Totally. Right? I will never forget my mother's meatloaf. Sorry, Mom.
I think we all have one of those meals in mind right now. I had one just pop in my head too. Right. Turkey tetrazzini.
That's an interesting one.
So, really, it's about identifying those mindsets, like what are our thought patterns around food, or maybe it's exercise, or and what are those thought patterns? Are they helping us? Are they helpful? Are they helping us get towards our goal or our vision of what we would like our life to be like? or are they holding us back? So it's not that the thought patterns are good or bad or right or wrong. We really work to eliminate that black and white thinking and just start to see things less judgmentally with a more just critical eye of saying, is this serving me, or is this something I can set aside and choose a new thought that will serve me, right?
Is there one exercise that someone who's listening right now who may be struggling with these same things or struggling about how to get started with this whole mindset thing, right? Mindset feels like this really, like we live in our mind, right? But like working on our mind, I don't think is something that we're used to, because we assume that to be working and on our health, it means that we're eating right or we're exercising. So what is one exercise you could give us that we could navigate just starting a mindset shift? I'm curious.
Oh, that's really great. I would say to take some time, get out a journal or a sheet of paper and just write down all of your thoughts about food, or about diet or weight loss, or how you're feeling about, oh, there she goes. about what you're eating, or how you're eating, or what's hard about it, or what your obstacles are, what your challenges are. And then take a look at those thoughts and take some time to really think, are these thoughts serving me? Are they true? Are they accurate? Because we have thoughts in our heads all day long that often we're not even aware of most of our thoughts, right? They're just sort of on autopilot. And most of our thoughts, research tells us, are negative thoughts, which is also really interesting.
That's concerning.
And, we've got this sort of negativity bias in our head to look for the problems. And so becoming more aware of our thoughts is really that first step. And then taking a look at one of those thoughts and offering a counter thought for that. So for example, talking with a parent who is feeling really frustrated about getting their kiddo to eat vegetables, and just
struggle.
Right. It's a struggle. It's a real struggle.
Really is. And there's been a lot of bribing in this house.
Sure. Right. So we have these thoughts, like, what are the thoughts that go through your head when you're struggling with a child who's giving pushback around food? Like,
I would say, like, I promise you this will help you run better and sleep better and move better, because you guys never know how to stop and sit down. And so, like, we've also like tried to have those conversations about like food not being negative or positive, more like, hey, let's start with something of substance, because like you're gonna eat that snack, and I promise you that in a half hour you're gonna come back and tell me that you're hungry. But like, let's eat something that's gonna like fill you up and not give you a stomach ache after 20 minutes of running around outside with your sibling.
Right. Oh, those are such good messages. So all of those would be like the counter thoughts that we could offer ourselves, right? Because when we're sitting down to eat and we're like, oh, I never can seem to eat right. Like, I'm always blowing it. I never can stay on a diet. Is it even worth it? Like, this is really hard. Offering ourselves those counter thoughts of, I'm going to feel so much stronger when I eat this way. When I make these choices, I know that my body just feels better. I feel accomplished when I'm eating well and nourishing myself. Setting an example for my children by eating well, even if it's causing a struggle, right? And so offering those thoughts and getting in the practice of just becoming aware of the thought that might be negative, recognizing it non-judgmentally, and replacing it with a counter thought that will serve us and get us towards our goal. And that's not something that happens overnight. It takes practice and time, but every time we replace that thought, we're working on shifting our mindset and developing new neural pathways that will eventually, over time, have us thinking in that new mindset.
Love that. So listeners, so any thoughts that you have, right? You're going to take your piece of paper like me. Don't do this if you're driving while listening, but you're going to take down a piece of paper of some of those thoughts that you have about food, negative, positive, whatever they are, write them all down, exhaust all of those thoughts, and then maybe try to give yourself some time to find some counter thoughts to that, right? I don't think you have to have an immediate answer to them, but I think there will probably be some things that we know are not true, yet we continue to think. And then we go, are they serving us? So that's a really good tip. One of my last questions was going to talk about like, hey, like what is one thing we can do to like help like work on our health? And so I think that that's part of that, right? Part of it is, working on the mindset shift and helping our kids work towards that mindset shift, because if we know more now about food and how our body reacts to food and how our body can be served by food, the mindsets that we got when we were growing up no longer serve us now. And I think that's hard too in a generation where I feel like there is a lot of conversation about how to parent and how to parent well. And there's just so much perfection on social media, right? Like I see these people baking and I'm like, that is not what my kitchen looks like. Just ask my husband. I'm telling you what, my kitchen is a mess. But I think we get these messages, right? I get a subliminal message that my kitchen needs to be clean while I'm baking and I have to have a full face of makeup on while I'm doing it. So being able to counteract those thoughts, like, nope, this is just how I roll in my own kitchen. And this is how I do things. So listeners, I think we've learned a lot today about obviously a career pivot, right? This just continues to come up on these podcasts that you're listening to, where we have people who are making these careers and then turn around and go, I think I have a different calling now. I think I need to make a fast pivot into something else. And we get these signs along the way. So we want you to start listening to those rocks that come up, right? I think the more that we listen to those rocks and view them as a different mindset of, what's this rock telling me? Yeah, that hurt, but like, what is this telling me now? And we talked about how we can work on our mindset in health coaching, right? Not just health and working out and eating right and eating the salad, but like working on the thoughts that we're telling ourselves every day around food and how we can help our kids do the same thing. And then lastly, in this education world of, people are in homeschool, people are in public school, private school, they're doing Montessori stuff, whatever. Love on your teachers, email them today. Let us know how it goes, right? Like come back to us and post on these comments on our feed and tell us how maybe that parent or that teacher was affected by you reaching out to them, because I think it could make all the difference. Do you agree with all of these thoughts, Caroline?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to hear it too. I know that's going to make a ripple effect.
I think it will. And, guys, life is better with you in it. And I'm so happy that you've been here on the podcast today to listen about how we can make the world a better place, literally one email at a time, and listening to one rock at a time, and just loving people well. So life's better with you in it. And Caroline, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with the world today on Life with Jen.
Thanks, Jen.
You're welcome. All right, everyone, come find us and then make sure you subscribe. Have a wonderful day. All right, and then I'm going to obviously edit this. All right, let's see.